Hey everybody, this is Matthew Naiman from Shutterstock.com, and today we're talking about Spectrum 8mm. Spectrum 8mm is a collection of 64 filmic elements captured optically in 4K. Elements from Spectrum are compatible with any nonlinear editing system. Let's start by taking a look at them in Adobe After Effects, and then move on to Adobe Premiere Pro and Final Cut Pro. So, here we are in Adobe After Effects, and we have some wonderful footage of a Supermarine Spitfire, a beautiful World War II fighter plane, making a low pass. Looks like a lot of fun. I gotta get me one of those one day. So, we're going to use some elements from the Spectrum pack to make this footage look a little bit more sort of, let's say, period authentic. Why don't we jump up into our assets, and why don't we start with some dirt. So Spectrum comes with beautifully shot dirt and streaks and smudges, all captured on 8mm film and then optically scanned in at 5K. So I'm going to jump back to our composition, grab some dirt, throw it on our timeline, and let's scale it down so it matches our frame a little bit better. Wonderful. Now you're going to want to play around with the blending modes that you have at your disposal. Generally, a screen blending mode is probably going to give you decent results, but our background footage is so bright, screen really only leaves behind the brightest parts of an image, so we're going to have a little bit of a hard time seeing any of what we're adding. I think I'm actually going to go with a hard light blending mode, which is going to preserve a lot of what we're getting out of the footage from Spectrum, and then we're going to jump into the opacity, and we're going to turn it down a little bit, and that's giving us a fairly authentic filmic look already without a whole lot of work. But I'm going to show you how we can amp this up and make this as authentic as we possibly can. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is, why don't we drop a new solid. And we're going to call this solid Film Gate. Then I'm going to grab a rounded rectangle tool, and we're going to draw a vaguely rectangular gate, and we're going to scale it up a little bit. And under the mask tools, we're going to select inverted. So this is going to act as a film gate, as if we had been shooting this on actual film. I'm going to feather it just a tiny bit. And now what we're going to do is return to our first frame and drop a position keyframe for our stock footage, and we're going to center our subject in the gate. We're going to jump to our last frame, and we're going to grab our footage, and we're going to center it in the gate. Oh yeah, you can see some sort of end of frame marker stuff there. Reminds me I should pull the film gate above the film so that it cuts everything off. And we're going to jump to a few random points in the shot, and we're going to manually center our subject in the film gate. This is going to give our footage a rougher handheld look and really kind of increase the realism of the effect that we're going for. Don't want to pull it up too much. Okay, why don't we take a quick look at what this looks like so far. That's looking pretty cool. And we're going to grab lens flare 2, drop it on our frame, and we're going to scale it down a little bit. And as you can see, lens flare 2 has this flare that moves from side to side, which is probably going to match our footage just perfectly. And I'm going to change the blending mode to screen. You'll see that it goes over top of our footage. And if I pre-render this, and if I hit RAM preview, you'll see that as we pan past the plane, we got our little lens flare going by. Looks really neat. Now, I'm also going to create a new black solid. We're going to call this black solid Vignette. There's some great third-party tools out there that let you do some vignetting, or even the Lumetri tools, but this is actually a technique I like a lot. I'm going to drop a vignette, and I'm going to draw an ellipse in it. I'm going to feather the ellipse, and I'm going to click inverted. By pressing T, I'm going to twirl open my opacity settings, and I'm just going to give it a little bit of opacity. I can then, by pressing M, expose my mask tools again, and I can expand it or contract it and feather it as I need to get the type of vignette I want. I'm going to pull these in a little bit to keep the whole edge vignetted. And feather it a little bit more. Okay, that's starting to look good. Then I'm going to simulate some wobble in the gate by dropping a position keyframe at the beginning and a position keyframe at the end on my film gate. Don't need to click the graph. I'm going to highlight position. I'm going to twirl open my wiggler, which is maybe the best name for tool in After Effects. Change the magnitude to 5, frequency to, let's try 8. Click apply. And I'm going to grab everything and parent it to the film gate. RAM preview. And now we have some very rough looking, very believable film footage. Could have been shot during World War II. There's one other thing we could do to make this more believable. If I go up to composition settings, we could actually change the frame rate from 23976 to 18 frames a second, which is a little bit more indicative of some older film cameras which tended to shoot at off speeds when they weren't attempting to match motion picture film quality. And here it is running at 18 frames a second. And I think that looks really neat. Why don't we jump on over to Adobe Premiere and have a look at how we can use some elements from Spectrum 8mm in that piece of software. Alright everybody, here we are in Adobe Premiere, and as you see we have this clip of what looks like maybe a busy day on the streets of Cuba. I love all these old cars. The piece looks really vintage, so I think we can just really amp it up by adding some stuff from the Spectrum pack. I'm going to jump into our assets, and I believe it was Lens Flare 6 I was looking at. As you can see, there's some great shutter streaks and some flaring. There's a nice film burn in there, and there's lots of great grain. So I'm going to grab that, drop it on top, shorten it to match our clip. I'm also going to go into the effects and scale it down because it's larger than our footage since it's 4K. And under blend mode, I'm going to select screen. So immediately you can see that the effects play on top of our footage. Very nice. I'm also going to look for that end burn and make sure it lines up with the end of our clip. Brilliant. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select our clip and I'm going to go to Effects, and then under Video Effects, Color Correction, I'm going to select Lumetri Color, and we're going to affect this a little bit so that it looks a little bit more like 8mm film. Under Creative, I'm probably going to, let's see, let's turn down the saturation a little bit. Let's run a quick curves on it, a little bit more contrast, but then maybe bring up the knee a little bit because the contrast on old 8mm film was not the greatest. And let's see if we can actually make the color temperature a little bit warmer, maybe a little bit more like sunset. Awesome. And I think I'm going to bring down the exposure just a tad. Cool. That's looking pretty good to me. I'm going to shy all this stuff. Then I'm going to twirl down vignette, and we're going to add a little bit of a vignette to our footage to emulate the fact that sometimes lenses for 8mm were not the greatest and didn't retain their brightness from edge to edge. So that's looking a little bit better. Play with the roundness just a tiny little bit. Beautiful. Let's hit play, but actually first I'm going to drop the resolution a bit just so that it plays a little smoother because my computer doesn't love the Lumetri effects in real time. Great. However, you may be able to see that the frame rate looks kind of wrong for film. It's a little bit too smooth. I think this original footage is 30 frames a second. So I'm going to do something interesting. I'm going to go up to Sequence Settings, and under Frame Rate, I'm going to change the time base to 15 frames a second. Click OK. Nothing should change duration-wise. But if we hit play, you'll notice everything has a slightly more filmic look to it. A lot of old 8mm stuff is kind of off time, doesn't look quite right. And I think I'm just going to nest this a little bit. And I'm going to click on it. I'm going to scale it up to about 105. And we're going to set a position keyframe on one side and a position keyframe on the other, just to give it a little bit of movement. There you go. Nice vintage clip of some cars from Cuba. Why don't we jump over to Final Cut Pro and have a look at how to do something similar over there. And here we are in Final Cut Pro, and we have some footage of some cool guys driving down the highway in a van. Looks like a good time. Wish I was there, but instead I'm making tutorials for you people, which is my second favorite thing to do. So we're going to grab some dirt from the Spectrum pack and throw it on top. It's not quite long enough, so I'm going to select it. I'm going to go to slow. Let's make it 50% as long, and then down under video quality, let's select optical flow, just so it's not too jumpy. It'll calculate the optical flow while I'm working. I can jump over to my compositing tab, and actually under compositing I'm going to go to transform, and I'm going to scale up the footage just so it's a little bit bigger than our very large footage. And when I hit play, you can see that this dirt has some really nice sort of little scratches and smudges on it. Plus the whole thing's this kind of brown color, which is really nice because it adds a little bit of like a sepia tint to our footage. Now, under general circumstances, you could set the blending mode to screen for this. It would kind of brighten everything up a little bit, and you'd be able to see all the dirt and everything on top of it. But I was playing around with this before, and I was quite a fan of the way that exclusion looked. I kind of liked that that little push to blue, and I like the dirt being a little bit more purple, and I really liked the look when we got some sort of scratches and smudges on it, just sort of how it treated everything. I'd recommend when you're playing around with more artistic effects like this, you play around with the different blending modes, because depending on what you pick, you can get really, really different looks. And I wouldn't get too bogged down in doing things exactly the way I'm doing it. You just want to make it look the way that works for you. Then I'm going to jump over to my end burns. Let's kind of find a nice burn to end this on. Yeah, that's pretty funky. Let's grab that, throw it on top, and this end burn I'm actually just going to set to screen, and we're going to scale it up a little bit. And we can just let that come in. No need to do anything too fancy. I am going to set some opacity keyframes. So let's just set one there and jump back and set that to 0 just so that it fades on a little bit. Yeah, and then we get some burns, and it should fade off nicely at the end. Probably going to have to kill our other footage underneath the burn. Awesome. And we could transition to some other footage, maybe our Cuba clip from before, and the transition could be hidden under that end burn. There you go. Something along those lines. Well, everybody, that's it for me today. For more great looking stock footage, visual effects plates, and tutorials like this one, be sure to visit Shutterstock.com. I'm Matthew Naiman, and I'll see you next time.